What's up everyone, it's Dakota and welcome to another Pioneer video. And this week we're going to be looking at a deck that took over a standard format for a very long time and was the standard of aggro deck to play in the format. Very fast, very hard to deal with, and even when people thought they solved the matchups and things like that, it just kept getting better and was still played and was still one of the most played decks of its time in standard. You might be able to know what I'm talking about. You definitely know if you've obviously read the title of the video. We're going to be taking a look at Atarka Red today in Pioneer and really just kind of showcasing exactly what makes this deck so explosive and why it's seeing now a resurgence in the Pioneer metagame. So let's go ahead, take a look at the deck, and see what's going on with it. So here we have the Gruul Aggro deck piloted by Doomwake, who actually took it to a second place finish in the Pioneer Challenge. I believe this was 2 weekends ago. It's one of the deck lists that I kind of like, and I think it's pretty interesting, even though I think there is some more streamlined builds and some definitely other variations, which I'll kind of go over as I talk about the deck today. But before I do that, please be sure if you have not already to subscribe to the channel if you have not. I post videos like this. I do videos for Modern as well as some other like discussion-y type videos, and of course, hopefully doing some live streaming here very, very soon as kind of things start to wind down towards the end of the year. If you've not already as well, there's a link to the Discord server in the description of this video. Follow that. Join. Go ahead, throw out some questions about like Modern, Pioneer, things like that. Other formats as well. It's not the only formats that I play, but it's the ones that I definitely enjoy playing the most. With that being said, let's go ahead and take a look at the Atarka Red deck. Obviously, the popularity of the Atarka Red decks back in its days in Standard come from being able to play the card Atarka's Command. Atarka's Command has 4 different modes. You can choose 2 of them. So for a red and green instant, your opponents can't gain life this turn, which is probably one of the least popular modes in that card. Atarka's Command deals 3 damage each opponent. You may put a land card from your hand on the battlefield. Creatures you control get +1/+1 and gain reach until end of turn. So Atarka's Command can kind of play like a defensive card. You can give your creatures +1/+1 and reach. So like in matchups like against like spirits and things like that, if you don't have necessarily any good attacks, a Tarkus command can give you that option of just if they don't have a counterspell, you kind of blow them out on like your own terms. And of course, getting to deal 3 damage to them means that you also get to put some pressure on their life total. But a lot of the times with this deck, in basically every other case, a Tarkus command is going to be dealing 6, 7, 8 points of damage just from its pump plus getting to deal 3 damage. So how the heck are we doing it? We have some pretty like aggressive creatures, and I don't mean that just because they're red creatures or that they have haste. Some of them are very good on just on rate on their own. So like in the 1-drop slot, you have like Phoenix Chick, Swift Spear, Legion Loyalist, and Balmac Courier. All these cards having haste. Phoenix Chick being the newest one from the Dominaria United. It can't block, but whenever you attack with 3 or more creatures, you can pay double red and you can return to the battlefield attacking with a +1/+1 counter on it. So very easy to do in a deck that is filled with roughly 14 1-drops and a lot of other like 2 drops as well. So you have like Swift Spear, who's going to get just a little bit better from like your Kamanos, which is also pseudo a 1 mana creature as well, because when you get to the last chapter, it'll flip into a haste creature. Your Play with Fires and Target's commands. Legion Loyalist, making your opponent's blocking decisions very difficult. Whenever you get to attack with at least 2 other creatures and Legion Loyalist, your creatures gain First Strike, Trample, and they can't be blocked by creature tokens this turn. Essentially meaning that any like token decks that might pop up, they're not going to be able to block as long as Legion Loyalist is being able to attack. Also, giving your creatures First Strike and Trample can be pretty big when you have cards like a Targus Command, when you just get to buff the team and a lot of like 2 and 3 toughness creatures aren't going to be able to block because they're just going to get completely blown out and you're still going to have a board of creatures even though you're like a Targus Command maybe necessarily didn't get the full damage in from the +1/+1 boost. Bombat Courier is something interesting that I've not seen in the other Gruul deck list, but something I wanted to highlight here, just because whenever it does attack, you can put the top card of your library under it face down, and you can pay a red and discard your hand and sacrifice the Bombat Courier to put all exiled cards in your hand. This is kind of a way that you can easily dump your hand. You're playing a lot of cheap spells. You can play this card get in, 3, 4 points of damage, get 4 or 5 cards underneath of it, and when you're down to two or like one card, you can just sacrifice the Ball Mac Courier, discard your one card, gas back up to like 5 cards. It's a pretty good rate in all things considered. Getting to deal like 3 or 4 damage and then drawing like 3 or 4 cards. Pretty good in my opinion. Going into the 2-drop slot, what really can push this deck over the top is getting to play Burning Tree Emissary. When it enters the battlefield, you add a red and a green. That of course allows you to play like any of your other creatures. Like you can cast like Kari Zev, or you can cast like Rimrock Knight. You can even go into like Yavimaya Iconoclast, just being able to put a bunch of power into play. Of course, you have like the option of even getting to surge in a Reckless Bushwhacker. Um, Obviously, I would think an ideal play is getting to play like a 1-drop attack and then get to like play 2 Burning Tree Emissaries and play a Reckless Bushwhacker. It'll give your other creatures control when it enters it for its surge cost. Other creatures +1/+0 and haste, which means that you're attacking for roughly 8 damage. This has haste, so 10 damage if you go 1-drop into Burning Tree, Bushwhacker. And putting your opponent at 10 when they only get to play 1 land and they're on the draw is pretty good as it turns out. That's kind of where like turn 3, like Atarka's command and like play with fire just on their own can kind of get there. Or even just playing like another 1-drop haster and then getting to Atarka's command as well. Um, Speaking of Yamaya Iconoclast, if it was kicked, it gets +1/+1 and haste until end of turn. So it's technically a turn 3 play that you can make where you end up attacking with a 4/3 on turn 3. Bushwhacker just being again another payoff for like when you play like a cheap spell. On turn 3, you could like play with fire, play a Kamano, or even another 1-drop, and then surge in a Reckless Bushwhacker. Play with fire is just a versatile damage spell. Can clear out any small creatures out of the way. If it deals damage to a player, you get to scry 1, which could help you find more gas to eventually just kill your opponent. Kamano's a card that we didn't really talk about too much. Deals damage to each opponent and each planeswalker that they control, and then the next creature you cast enters play with an additional +1/+1 counter. This opens up the door for essentially just making your creatures just a little bit bigger. Like having like a 2/3 Swift Spear is pretty good because it definitely beats a lot of the creatures like in the mono white deck, without in turn trading itself off or needing additional pumps to not die to a lot of like their basic creatures. Um, the mana base, pretty self-explanatory. You have Carplusion Forest, Crag Crown Pathway, and Stomping Ground as 12 untapped green sources that you're able to splash the Iconoclast, cast the Burning Trees if you don't necessarily have all red mana, even though a lot of your lands just naturally produce red mana. And of course, casting the namesake card of the deck, Atarka's Command. You have a Soken'Zin, which can create some tokens, which creates 2/1/1s, which conveniently can help you with like Legion Loyalists to regain Battalion. You have 4 mountains, just because your deck is mainly red anyway, and 4 Den of the Bugbear, just as a way to sink more mana if you tend to flood out. And of course, this is just an aggressive card because of your opponent cannot deal with Den of the Bugbear, or again, if there's like a Legion Loyalist in play, short of like a removal spell, Den can kind of like take over with a Legion Loyalist. The sideboard, you have like Rending Volleys, Lava Coils. These deal, well, Lava Coil more dealing with like some of the big creatures from like the mono green decks, where Rending Volley kind of gets to deal with cards from like the white and blue creature decks, aka like the Spirits decks and things like that. And of course, like in the mono white matchups as well. Unlicensed Hearse getting to mess with like the Grease Fang decks, and of course, Unlicensed Hearse gets to be very big on its own. Karisev's expertise can just nab a creature from your opponent, especially like in the green matchups where you can take like a Cavalier or even a one of their trolls, and getting to play a 2-drop as well lets you play like a Rimrock Knight, a Iconoclast, or even like a Burning Tree Emissary. You can even put in like another haste creature just to push extra damage to on top of it, and it can lead you to some plays where you just kind of kill your opponent out of nowhere. Squee, Dubious Monarch, just another kind of like Den of the Bugbear effect where you can attack. It's going to create a 1/1 red goblin tapped and attacking, and you can cast it from your graveyard by exiling 4 other cards from your graveyard and paying 4 mana for it. Of course, having haste also gets to put pressure on your opponent, and again, just gets to make 1/1s as it attacks. Experimental Frenzy is a card that I know people have, mainly like Tandy, Todd Anderson, didn't necessarily like too much, and just opted to play like some other type of like card draw. But I could still see Experimental Frenzy in a more streamlined, like low to the ground version of the deck being able to play. Um, One, Hazard the Fervent. This card was a staple of like red aggro decks back in its time in Standard, and I don't see why this deck would be any different when you just get to do the things that this deck gets to do by just naturally playing things, killing your opponent, and just in case it's not enough, you have a card that can kind of go over the top and really put them into the abyss and is very hard to deal with because there is not a lot of exile removal in the format that people are playing. At least to my knowledge, they're not really playing it in huge maps, huge amounts. It also gives some inevitability by just getting deal 2 damage to your opponent. So if there's a stalemate on the board, Hazoret will eventually kill them, and they will have to find a way to kill Hazoret as well. So that's the Atarka red deck. Going through it blazing fast as the deck would want that to happen. Very simple game plan. It's a very simple yet can be feel smart slash really just a fun deck to play. I mean, aggro decks, I think, are fundamentally some of the most fun decks that you can play in the format. And with a deck as fast as this, and just being able to generate like certain combos into like your game plan and things like that is very good, and is a deck that should always be considered seeing play. This deck is very well positioned with mono green kind of being a thing in the format. You can kind of overpower the red black mid range deck. Obviously, that's a deck that you really don't want to face, being the creature deck that wants to like a target command your opponent out of the game. But there is some draws where you just have a million one drops and like a Tarkus commands, and that can be good enough to force your opponent's like 1 and 2 mana removal, like kind of pinch them up on mana, and eventually just get them to such a low life total that they have to have very specific cards to get them back into it, or they could just die to the bevy of aggressive creatures that are here. In a format where um, there is the fast decks like the mono white and even like the occasional Boros decks, and you have the decks like mono green and black red mid range that kind of try to go very big, one going with an infinite combo and the other one trying to just control the game to a point where it can take over with some of its creatures like Kalidas. This deck just definitely finds a happy medium to find a way to beat both of them, and definitely very skilled players will be rewarded in those matchups by understanding how those matchups work and things like that. So if this is a video that you enjoyed and you want to see more Pioneer videos like this, along with any other videos on my channel, be sure to leave a like on this video. Subscribe to the channel as well so you can see videos like this and all that fun, happy stuff. Again, there's a link in the description for the Discord server. If you would, that'd be something you'd be interested in joining, go ahead, follow that link, and join as well. And yeah, that's going to do it for me this video. I hope you all enjoyed, and I hope to see you all in the next one.